Lord of the Flies trivia question number one is, what is the conflict happening in the background of the novel? And we're talking about Lord of the Flies, William Golding's classic novel from 1954, about a group of schoolboys who crash land on an island. We're going to start with easy factual questions and then work our way towards hard questions and find out how well you know the book. All right, so the first question was, what's the background conflict? It seems like there's a war taking place. It's probably a nuclear war, probably a global war. The boys were being evacuated when they landed there. And then, spoiler alert, at the end, you see a warship and a soldier. So there's this big conflict going on. All right, so I've already answered this one, but question number two, how do the boys arrive on the island? I think you know their plane crashes. So the novel tells us that the crash leaves a scar in the jungle, which is kind of symbolic, humanity's being wounded and so forth. And then later they find the pilot. So it was a plane. Question three, who is the first boy that we meet? All right, so we very quickly meet a couple of boys as they're wandering, out of the jungle. The first one is Ralph, though, who's the main protagonist. He pretty quickly meets up with Piggy. Question number four, who discovers the conch shell? Remember, this is the shell they use to, call everyone together for meetings. Who's the boy who actually finds it? You probably got it narrowed down to either Piggy or Ralph. It's actually Piggy that finds it, and then Ralph's the one who blows it. And, Piggy understands the object's usefulness, but Ralph is the one who actually uses it for authority. So on that point, question number five, what does the conch represent at first? And if you think about it, over the course of Lord of the Flies, civilization breaks down, disorder takes over. But at first, they're all together, and the conch represents order because they use it to call assemblies and get everyone together and acting in unison. At that first meeting, who was elected leader? Okay, so you probably have two options here, and the correct option is our main protagonist, Ralph. He's the actual chosen leader. There's another guy who wants to be the leader, though. And on that point, question number seven, who leads the choir boys? You remember there's a bunch of boys on the beach, and then along come the choir boys in their robes, and they have one leader, and that leader is Jack. It's Jack Merridew. So the choir boys are eventually going to kind of descend and become hunters, and several of them have weird, kind of scary characteristics, but Jack is the leader. I kind of just answered this for you, but question number eight, what job are Jack and his group first assigned? Okay, hunting. From the start, they're supposed to go catch food to feed everyone. Question number nine, what is the boys' most important practical task early in the novel? Ralph tells them, we've got to do something. What is it? Okay, the answer is to keep the signal fire burning. So the signal fire is what's going to attract rescue. And at one point, of course, they miss an opportunity to be rescued because they haven't kept the fire going. Question number 10. What do Piggy's glasses help the boys do? Remember, at first he volunteers them, and then they're kind of taken from him against his will also. The answer is that they start fires. But if you want a slightly harder question, what do they represent? What do the glasses represent? It's kind of science and technology, kind of the intelligence of humanity. All right, question number 11. What is the beast at first believed to be? You remember some of the little ones, the little kids are afraid of the beast. And what they're describing is a mysterious creature. They're just afraid, scared of the dark and so on. And they're afraid that there might be this creature out there. And at one point, so question number 12, at one point they talk about, I think it's the name of the chapter is Beast from Air. What is the beast from air? What does that turn out to be? You remember the leaders go out and find the beast or look for the beast. And what is it actually? It's a dead parachutist. So this is, someone who presumably escaped from their crashing plane. And so the boys are afraid of a monster, but the monster turns out to be a dead soldier from the war. All right, question 13. What do the boys call the younger children? I actually said it a couple minutes ago. It's little uns. Question 14. What do the little uns call the older boys? If you didn't already know, you could probably figure it out. It's big uns. Number 15. Who is Simon? He's one of the main characters. He's a quiet, sensitive boy who goes up alone and has these thoughtful or spiritual experiences. Like at one point, he kind of hallucinates that the head of the pig that they kill is speaking to him, and Simon's a Christ figure. There's a lot of literary criticism about him. He's interesting. Okay, question 16. What is the Lord of the Flies literally? When the novel refers to the Lord of the Flies as an actual thing in the book, what is it? And that would be the pig's head mounted on a stick surrounded by flies. And that's what speaks to Simon. The Lord of the Flies is the literal translation of Beelzebub, which is a name for the devil in the Bible. And so the pig kind of represents evil as well. All right, question number 17. Who has a terrifying conversation with the Lord of the Flies in the jungle? And again, this is Simon, who, critics will say it seems like Simon has epilepsy, so he's probably hallucinating this, but it's this kind of terrifying vision that addresses the topic of evil for us. Question 18. What truth does Simon discover about the beast? He realizes that the beast is not some external monster. It's not going to come out of the water or out of the sky or something. The beast is actually evil within the boys themselves. And it's, kind of the point of the novel is that evil is inside people. It's not some external thing you can just blow up or fight or something. All right, question 19. What ultimately happens to Simon? All right, do you remember this part? They're having a dance around the fire, and in their frenzy, the boys kill Simon. They're pretending to kill the pig, and they kill Simon. And this is the point where kind of the savage ritual and group dynamics that they have spill over into real life, into an actual murder. Question number 20. What happens to Piggy? All right, he also is killed, but this time Roger, who's kind of a sadistic one of the hunters, releases a boulder that kills Piggy and also breaks the conch. So symbolic of that too. All right, I just answered this question for you, but question number 21, we'll see if you were listening 2 seconds ago. What happens to the conch? And the answer is it's destroyed when Piggy's killed. And they happen together, so that's like reason and order being destroyed at the same time. Question number 22, who becomes Jack's main violent enforcer? Okay, we just mentioned him. He's the one who killed Piggy. It's Roger. And like I say, he's kind of sadistic. Question number 23. How is Ralph finally rescued? And this is, all of this is going to be spoiler alerts, but this is at the very end of the book. Remember, Ralph's being chased out of the jungle. He falls down, and then it turns out he's at the feet of a naval officer who arrived because he saw the smoke on the island. So, kind of an ironic ending, but Ralph's rescued by the soldier who's actually fighting in a battle. Question number 24. Okay, more about that. The question is, why is the final rescue ironic? Well, and one reason is the smoke that brings rescue comes from the boys setting the island on fire while hunting Ralph. So plan A was that they would have a signal fire and that would attract a ship, but actually they completely descended into savagery and tried to kill Ralph, and that's what attracted help. Okay, question 25. What does the officer assume about the boys? You remember he makes a comment at the end. He says that he's disappointed. He assumes the British boys would have behaved better and been more civilized. And again, this is very ironic because he's a soldier. He's on a warship. He's going around trying to blow up boatfuls of people, and he's thinking that they should be more civilized. Okay, so those are kind of the easy fact-based questions. Let's make things a little more difficult, a little more character-based in this next section. Which character is most associated with physical attractiveness, confidence, and natural leadership? Okay, and the answer is going to be our protagonist, Ralph. So the deal with Ralph is that he looks like a leader. He's easily chosen as leader because he looks the part, and his authority is kind of visual. Question 27, which character is most associated with reason and practical intelligence? We talked about this. It's Piggy. Piggy's often right, but he kind of lacks the social vocabulary and the skills to have any kind of influence. And the novel is honest in possibly a cruel way about how being correct doesn't mean that people are going to listen to you. And that's what Piggy finds out over and over. Question 28. Which character is most associated with violence, domination, and appetite for power? And this is going to be the leader of those choir boys, Jack. Jack wants to be a hunter. That's what he says at first. But he doesn't just want the meat. He wants control. And hunting, controlling the supply of the meat, is going to be a path for him to gain influence over the tribe. Question 29. Which character is most associated with spiritual insight? We talked about this a little bit too. It's Simon. Simon has this intuition about what's going to happen, and he sees what other people can't. Most importantly, that the true beast is internal. Question 30, which character shows the most frightening descent into sadism? I've said it a few times. It's Roger. And you remember the kind of disturbing scene where some kids, the little ones are playing in the water, and Roger starts throwing stones near them, not at them. And that's because he's still feeling some constraint from civilization. But even then, what he really wants is to throw rocks at the person. And later the restraint goes away, and then he's like truly violent. All right, so section 3, let's move on to more the symbolism of the novel. And there are so many interesting academic papers written about this. You can find a lot of good content online. But let's go through the questions. Question 31, what does the conch symbolize? All right, it again is law, order, democracy, all the things that keep a society ordered. Question 32, what did Piggy's glasses symbolize? And we mentioned earlier, but it's intelligence, science, technology. It's the abilities that humanity has created through its cleverness. Question 33, what does the signal fire symbolize? This is, Ralph's the one always pushing for the signal fire, and it, for him, of course, represents rescue, but it's also symbolic of hope, another part of civilization, kind of long-term thinking that keeps society ordered. Question 34, what does the beast symbolize? The beast is a symbol of fear, irrationally, and ultimately the evil that can exist in a human. Question 35, what does the painted face symbolize? So at some point, the hunters start painting their faces. And what is that all about? So the symbolism is a loss of individual identity and the freedom to act violently because you're without a mask. You don't have shame anymore because you're hidden. And once Jack paints his face, he starts acting like he's liberated from normal rules. So one way to think about it is the mask doesn't hide who he is. It actually reveals what he is in kind of horrifying ways. Question 36, what does the island itself symbolize? And William Golding, there's an audio version of the novel you can listen to where he's actually reading it, and it has some commentary beforehand. If you can track that down, I found it on Overdrive, but it's a really great reading of the book. And this is one of my favorite books. I read it probably every year. But he talks about this explicitly, that he went with an island because he wanted a microcosm of the real world, a miniature society where you could kind of test aspects of human nature. Question 37, what does the pig's head symbolize? And this is, again, the physical Lord of the Flies represents corruption, savagery, temptation, and then also kind of the dark truth that Simon figures out about human nature. Question 38, what does the naval officer symbolize? He represents adult civilization. Of course, he arrives and it's like, oh, the adults are on the scene again, but also the hypocrisy of this civilization because he's condemning the children's violence while engaging in much larger scale violence in the real world. All right, next section. Let's do more like interpretive trivia. So question 39, is Lord of the Flies mainly about children being naturally evil? And the answer is not exactly, not really. It's more about the fragility of civilization and how quickly social order can collapse. And it's interesting to see it portrayed as a group of children, but it wouldn't have to be. It would be, you could have a similar book written with adults. It just wouldn't hit quite as hard maybe. Question 40, why are there no adult survivors on the island? And in terms of structure of the novel and just the theme, it's to let the boys create their own society. Golding removed adults so that civilization could be built from the grounds up without, if you had adults there, they'd presumably say, well, the way we do it back in England is so-and-so, but there was no one really to say that. Question 41, why does Ralph fail as a leader? This is a serious theme of the book. Ralph represents order and rescue. You would think that he would succeed. People like him at first, but he just can't compete with Jack's immediate short-term rewards: meat, excitement, belonging, and fear-based power. And you can see that in actual government and leadership generally, is the tension behind actual order and long-term well-being versus quick wins that sometimes appeal to people. Question 42, why is Jack an effective rival leader? Like, you would think that maybe the boys would see him as kind of a psychopath or something, but the answer is what we were just talking about. He gives the boys things they can feel right away, like food in their hands, feeling safe from the beast, and so on. His leadership is not logical. He doesn't appeal to reason. It's emotionally powerful. And maybe he's smart that way, or maybe he's just lucky, but the appeal he has meets people at an emotional level. Question 43, why is Piggy ignored even when he's right? And the simple answer to that one is because he lacks charisma. He doesn't have status. He doesn't have physical power. You don't see him and think that's a person I want to be. And again, the novel suggests that truth alone is weak unless society takes steps to protect it. Question 44, what is so tragic about Simon's death? The tragedy there, the answer is, the tragedy there is that Simon is the one who actually understands the truth about the beast, but he's killed before he can explain it. So this is one of many ironies in the book, but the boys destroy the person who might have saved them from their irrational fear. And it's their kind of this tribalism, this irrational fear that leads them to do it. Question 45, why does the novel end with Ralph crying? Okay, and the answer is that Ralph is crying for his lost innocence, as well as his realizations about the darkness of human nature, and then also the death of Piggy. And so he's rescued physically, but he's learned some dark truths that he can't unlearn. Question 46, is the ending happy? And the answer would be maybe just barely on the surface because they're rescued, but the rescue comes from a warship, and so they're kind of leaving one violent world for another. Question 47, what is the novel saying about civilization? And the answer is civilization is real, but it's fragile. It depends on a lot of things, shared beliefs, rules, memory, restraint, and there are just a bunch of things that can go wrong. Okay, 3 more questions here. Question 48, what is the novel saying about fear? And one thing it's saying is that fear can create the monster that people are trying to escape. The monster might not be real. It's the fear is actually the root of it. Question 49, what is the novel saying about crowds or groups? And the answer is that groups can dissolve personal responsibility. In business literature, you see this a lot where, people in corporations will sometimes do unethical things. And the answer turns out the reason for it is at least partly because of diffuse responsibility. When you're part of an organization, you might feel less personally responsible. Or a more stark example is like the Nuremberg trials, when Nazi prison guards explained what they were doing. They were just following orders. It's like the large bureaucratic organization made them feel like personal responsibility was no longer important. And in the novel, Simon's death isn't just one person murdering someone. It's a group ritual. And afterwards, even Ralph and Piggy are kind of trying to rationalize away what happened. Okay, final question. Question 50. What is the darkest interpretation of the beast? Okay, if you want to take the darkest possible angle on the novel, it's the beast is not something hunting the boys. The beast is the boys. It's what the boys become. And so they become the very thing they're afraid of. All right, well, those are some trivia questions. If you basically got all those answers right, then you read the book and it seems like you understood it pretty well. There's actually a lot more to say. There's kind of Freudian analysis of it and all these other angles that have been taken to understand this book. It's short and compelling and brilliant. Really great writing by William Golding. Lord of the Flies starts as a survival story, but by the end, it's not whether they can escape the island, it's whether they can escape the beast. And the answer seems to be no. But there's still something. I don't think William Golding was fatalistic or negative about this. Again, listen to him if you get a chance. But he was just trying to get to the bottom of why some of the bad things that happen in the world actually happen. All right, Lord of the Flies, if you haven't read it, definitely do. But fantastic, fantastic book.